Hi there, Hollis families. Today I'm going to use some measuring skills to make my dog some dog treats. Learn how to do it and you can try it at home too. Here we go. So here's my recipe for homemade dog treats. You're going to start by preheating the oven at 350 degrees. I already have that going. We're going to need to use about 3/4 of a cup of leftover squash or sweet potato puree. You need 1 egg. You need about 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 cups of flour, maybe a little bit more for rolling, and about 1/4 of a cup of peas. They can be frozen or leftover canned. So then I'm going to mix the egg and the squash together in my bowl. Then I'm going to stir in my flour, and finally I'm going to fold in my peas. Once that's all mixed together, I'm going to roll it out on my cutting board or my little rolling mat. So here's the rest of it here. So I'm going to roll it out. You have to put some flour down first to make sure that it doesn't stick. Once that's done and you get it to about 1/4 inch thick, you can then use a pizza cutter or whatever cookie cutter shape that you'd like for your dog biscuits. Cut them out, put them on a grease-lined or parchment-lined cookie sheet, which I have ready to go off to my side. And then you're going to bake them in the oven for about 30 to 40 minutes on the 350 degrees, as I said earlier. Just make sure they're nice and golden brown before you take them out of the oven. So let's get started. So I've got some leftover squash from last night's dinner that I'm going to put into a measuring cup. So it asked for about 3/4 of a cup of squash. So I'm going to take a nice big scoop with my measuring cup. I'm going to pack it down in, scrape off a little bit. Don't need quite all of that. Maybe I'll even make another batch in a couple of days for the dogs, because my dogs like to go through dog cookies pretty quickly. So in goes the squash to my bowl. Next, I'm going to put my egg in the bowl. So I'm going to crack it, pop it in there, set that off to the side, and I'm going to mix those two together. Shouldn't take much time at all because the squash is already nice and soft and cooked. So once you kind of got the egg incorporated into the bowl and you scrape the sides down, then you're going to add your 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 cups of flour. I have a big 12-pound bag of flour that I just opened up. So when you're doing flour, make sure that you take the back side of a knife and level it off nice and flat. So in goes a whole cup. Now I'm going to switch to my measuring cup that's a 1/4 measuring cup. Scoop in, level it off with the back side of my knife. In goes the 1/4 of a cup. I may need to add a little bit more, as the recipe said, between 1 1/4 and 1 1/2. So I'm going to mix that flour in. You're looking for a pretty thick dough. You want it almost like the consistency of a biscuit dough for those of you that do any type of baking. You want it dry so that it does stick together and it rolls out nicely, and it helps with the moisture content for the dog biscuits when they're trying to dry in the oven. All right, so I'm almost mixed together here. Pretty much incorporated. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some leftover peas from last night's dinner, 1/4 of a cup of those. So again, I'm going to go in and scoop and put those in there. And again, it looks like I've got about the perfect amount to make another batch tomorrow or the next day. So I'm going to fold them in. Now, folding is generally a rolling motion with your spoon. Rolling motion. Rolling motion. All right, they're getting pretty well incorporated. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hands and I'm going to really get that dough into a ball now. And I'm going to transfer it to my rolling mat. So here we go. Work the dough with my hands. Coming together nicely. And a little bit of the moisture of the peas is folding it all together nicely into a nice ball. So not only are these quick to make, the dogs will certainly like them. And it's another way to use up some leftovers in the fridge and make a nice healthy snack for my dogs. All right, so now that I've got my dough all rolled out, brought together, I'm going to scoop a little bit of flour, lay it on my rolling mat here, plop my dough down, roll it around on the flour, and I'm going to start just pressing it down. I can use a rolling pin, but my hands will work just fine to get it to about 1/4 of an inch thick. I'll tip this up just so you can kind of see how it's coming together here. Okay. Nice and smooth. Almost thin enough. And it is about ready to go. All right, so now you can use a knife, you can use a cookie cutter, whatever you like. I'm going to use my pizza cutter. And I'm going to try to, first of all, make this into a nice square so it kind of helps me make even size dog biscuits. And I will use that scraps after. So I'm going to cut those off. So now I've got a nice square of dough. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it into 16 little pieces. 4 times 4 makes 16. So that we've got them about evenly spaced. I'm going to quickly transfer those 16 to my parchment paper lined baking sheet. And I will roll the rest of them out after I make them into another flattened piece of dough. So this didn't take much time at all, and in 30 to 40 minutes from now, dog cookies will be ready to go. All right, so I've got those onto my cookie sheet. There we go. And to finish up the remaining portion of dough, just going to squash it back together. There should be enough flour still on my mat that I use for rolling up pie crust and all of those sorts of doughy things. This time I'm going to try to form it right into a square as I go, so I can just go right at it, making those pretty evenly sized dog biscuits. All right, so here we go. Again, I've got a pretty big square here. This time I'm going to do a 3 by 3. 3 times 3 is 9. For a total of 16 plus 9 for a grand total of 25 lovely dog cookies. So 30 to 40 minutes in the oven and doggies will be happy. Here we are, ready to go. Dog biscuits going in the oven. And there you have it. Sweet potato and pea dog biscuits.